Well, welcome back to the Film Defender. We're in a bit of a different location today. That's because I wanted to bring you into my defense cave and just have a little conversation one-to-one. Now, as some of you may know, we are planning on defending Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, next. But due to some scheduling conflicts, it's not going to be out for a few more weeks at the soonest. So I wanted to give you guys something in the meantime so that you guys knew that I was still alive and didn't decide to unsubscribe from me, so please don't. Please subscribe if you haven't, actually. I'd appreciate it. So as you can see, I'm starting a new video series called Rave Session. What is that? Not self-explanatory enough for you? Well, the Rave Session is basically where I take a movie that is universally beloved and heap upon it all the praises. So when trying to decide where to start with this new series, I eventually settled on a director who I have a ton of respect for. Probably my favorite director working today, doing what is his finest work to date, in my opinion. And that is Christopher Nolan's Inception. Let's talk about this movie, shall we? Man, where to begin with this film? So intricate. It's got so much awesomeness. I mean, too much awesomeness. Just all of it. All the awesomeness. So right from the get-go, this movie completely floored me. And one of the major reasons for that is Hans Zimmer's gorgeous score. One of his best scores he's ever written. Criminal that it didn't win the Oscar that year. Come on, Inception is a genius piece of orchestrating. The music is just, the composition is so well done. The mathematics that go into interlaying all these different melodies at different times depending on what stage of dream they're in, and then using that genius device of letting somebody know that the dream is about to end by playing which slowed down sounds like the booming French horns that we hear at the beginning of this movie. Kind of telling us that the dream is about to begin in a way. So when the Warner Brothers logo comes up and we hear that piano tinkling that beautiful chord, and then all of a sudden the French horns start to come in quietly, and then they just build and build and build until they're this booming crescendo that just like blows you away, and it just thrusts you right into this story. It's gripping immediately. One of the great things about Inception is that it doesn't really want to tell you everything. It wants you to engage with it. It's talking about shared dreaming, and movies have always been a metaphor for dreaming. And shared dreams are sort of what theaters encapsulate. Nolan is such a big proponent of seeing movies in a theater and experiencing that shared dream in a way that it makes total sense that he would envision this story. And framing it around an action slash heist movie with sci-fi elements is just a token of his creativity that really sets this movie apart even further. But really the linchpin of this film isn't the amazing visual effects, which we'll talk about a little bit later, or the incredible cinematography, or even the score, which is genius, as I've said. I think it's the emotional story. This movie doesn't get enough credit for its emotion and for the character journey that we see Cobb go through. So Inception at its core is a brilliant metaphor for catharsis and that yearning to make something in our past right again. For Cobb, he wants to overcome his guilt at performing Inception on his wife, as we'll talk about later on in the video. It's about the power of ideas, how they can shape us, and the emotions that accompany those ideas, and what it really takes in order to confront those emotions. I mean, sometimes we can reach catharsis through sort of a forged experience, like they perform with Fisher when they want him to reconcile his emotional turmoil with his father at the end of the movie in order to get him to decide to dissolve his father's empire. But when it comes to Cobb, he doesn't have the benefit of somebody orchestrating a perfect scenario in which he can overcome his guilt. He has to confront that guilt by facing up to what he did, owning it, and moving on. And I think that's a really powerful message in and of itself, let alone with all the other intricate emotions and his yearning to be back with his kids, which everybody should be able to relate to some degree. That relationship with his guilt, with himself, I think is such an interesting idea that we haven't seen that much in movies, and it's never really been portrayed in this way, in such a creative and visual manner. So anybody who's seen Nolan's Batman movies knows that he likes to make things as plausible and realistic as possible. And I really enjoy that part of his filmmaking style. It allows me to kind of grant it a certain level of authenticity that I wouldn't if it was too hyper-realistic or fantastical. Even his dream world, which is constructed in a way so that it will feel like reality. That's the purpose of these shared dreams, is to make the person, the subject, feel like they really are in the real world. Dreams fool us all the time in that way. It's only, like Cobb says, after we wake up that we realize something was actually strange. It's fascinating to think that somebody could get into that process, create a dream within your head that you're sharing in order to steal your information. That alone could be its own movie, but the fact that Nolan sets that part of it up in order to build upon it and up the stakes that much further is just masterful. I love that Nolan takes that complex idea and brings an emotional stake to it as well. I love how Nolan doles out this information. He doesn't just come out from the beginning, give us a bunch of backstory, tell us that Maul died and that she set him up for her murder and that it was actually the idea that he planted in her mind that killed her, that led to her suicide, actually, I should say, and that they spent 50 years there, and so he did give her the life together, that they grew old together like he promised her. All that stuff is just so brilliantly interweaved at the perfect moments in this story to keep us invested and to pay off the time that we're spending going along in this story, which in its own right has these other payoffs throughout the narrative that make us glad to be following along. So I love the way Nolan constructs these dreams, or thought of these dreams as a means to invade somebody else's mind and steal their secrets. So basically he's got an architect that creates the landscape of the dream to put the person into, and they've got to create it completely without memory. They have to create something brand new or else they could lose grasp of their reality. And in order for them to keep grasp of reality and know whether or not they're in a dream, because they could get lost in their own subconscious if they believe they're in their own reality, they have a brilliant device called a totem, which definitively tells somebody whether or not they're in a dream, and they are the only ones who can use that totem. So for Cobb, he has his wife's top, which she actually came up with the idea to spin the top and it goes forever. Arthur, he's got the loaded die that'll only land on a certain number, and he's the only person that knows what number that'll land on to know whether or not he's in a dream. For Ariadne, she's got the chess piece, so she knows how much force it takes to knock it over. I'm guessing if she's in a dream, if she tries to knock it over, it won't fall over or something like that. For Eames, his is it's a forged chip, poker chip that he uses. I don't know how exactly it works, it doesn't really show us, but I think it's a really interesting detail that all of these are sort of game pieces. It's probably worth mentioning too that the team that Cobb assembles does very much resemble the team that surrounds a director of a film, and I don't know if he intentionally did it. He hasn't stated that it was an intentional decision. Maybe it's just innately how he approaches creative endeavors, but Cobb is obviously the director. Eames is the actor. Ariadne is the screenwriter. Yusuf is the cinematographer, you could say. Arthur is sort of like the special effects supervisor or visual effects supervisor. And Saito is the producer, the one backing up the money for this project. And the way that he approaches how they're going to deliver this Inception to Fisher is very much how I kind of picture a creative team of a film trying to work out how their character is going to go through their arc. So they're debating about how this guy is going to reconcile his feelings with his father and how they're going to use that to convince him to break up his father's energy conglomerate. You know, they have to kind of come to the decision that positive feelings trump negative feelings all the time, and so they want to give him a positive emotional experience so that it'll make him more likely to break up his father's empire. It's a really interesting metaphor for filmmaking, and the idea of getting lost in a dream is so fascinating to think about when you're doing something creative, how you can just do it for hours on end and not realize how much time is passing by. It's sort of like when Dom and Mal go into the dream world just experimenting, and they get to limbo and they just create for 50 years until Cobb finally realizes that they have to get back home, that this isn't real. There are those moments when you're doing something creative or you realize that, you know, this can't last forever. You have to wrap it up at some point. You can't just live in a fantasy. So I think that that's really imaginative and yet also relatable and something that we can all sort of understand. The visual effects of this film, Oscar winning, could almost go without mentioning, but I mean, there are so many memorable, iconic moments, especially the cityscape folding over itself when Ariadne wants to test the physics of the dream world. That is such a brilliant, mind-blowing moment that we've never seen in a movie before. It's a testament to how striking that image is that 6 years later, when Marvel is using similar imagery for Doctor Strange with cityscapes folding around, that everybody immediately said it's just like Inception, which isn't a ding against Doctor Strange. I think that movie is going to be awesome, but it just shows how influential Inception is, that it formed ideas in other artists' minds that they wanted to capture that same sense of awe that a moment like the cityscape folding over brings us. Another amazing moment is when Ariadne realizes that she's in a dream and that their time is about to expire, and so the dream starts collapsing around them, and we see all the little pieces of fruit start to explode, the boxes that they're on then start to explode, then the street starts to explode and the building around them, and then cars start flipping around, and it just keeps escalating and escalating, and then we hear the booming of the horn start to go on in the background, indicating that the time is running out, and then all of a sudden, it's just a dream, then why are you it's just a beautiful moment of sort of a ballet of destruction. It's also illustrating a fascinating idea about dreams that movies do mimic. The fact that nobody really knows how you got to a place in a dream, you just sort of end up there. That's something that Nolan toys with us with as well. There are moments like when he says he's going to go to Mombasa, he just shows up there, he's immediately with Eames, and it makes you wonder, is he in a dream there? I haven't gone back to see if his wedding ring is on, but I don't think it is. I mean, there are little traps throughout the screenplay to make you question reality, and I think that that's intentionally placed. I mean, that fight scene on the second dream level is unparalleled. The spinning room with Joseph Gordon-Levitt actually doing the stunts, fighting that other guy as that van is flipping in the first dream, is just astounding. I mean, there's no way you can watch that scene and not get just pumped by what you're seeing. It's incredible, and I haven't seen anything like it before. I probably will never see anything as exciting again because it was just so unexpected. But they did set it up. Yusuf said that he customized the sedative so that it would leave inner ear function intact, which means they'll be able to hear the music, but it also means that their balance would be affected by, you know, their equilibrium. So when the van is flipping, that's going to affect their sleeping selves, which affects them in the next layer down. It's just all so precisely crafted to not leave any holes out. And the holes that he leaves are intentional holes to try to lead you into a certain way of thinking. So let's talk about the ending, because this is by far the most fascinating part of the movie, which is saying a heck of a lot. So the whole question about whether or not Dom really made it out of the dream and is actually going back to see his family for the first time in 2 years, or if he's just in a further state of limbo in a new reality that he's created, in which he is able to go home. Everybody made it out of Inception without any problems. Everything goes through without a hitch. And there are a few things that lead you to believe that. For one thing, his kids seem to be dressed in the same clothes throughout the film. At varying points of the movie, we see either a flashback of them or just a projection of his subconscious invading the dream world where they're running away and standing in that same pose. However, if you look into the credits of the film, you notice that there are two different sets of actors that play Cobb's kids. And I heard an interview where Nolan was very keen on letting everybody know that fact. They didn't try to hide it. He said in the credits, you'll see they're played by two different children, and there are very intentional differences in their clothing as well. They're not wearing the same clothes. They're wearing very similar clothes, but they're not exactly the same. So is that just Cobb trying to reconstruct that moment from memory and not quite getting it right? But if that's the case, then how come he can remember it so perfectly in all of his other dreams without that distinct difference? Is it because he expects them to wear slightly different clothes, but that's what he remembers most, is that last moment with them, and so he's recreating that moment in his mind and altering it to make himself believe that it's reality? Is he performing Inception on himself at the end of the movie? Who knows? But I think Nolan might be trying to lead you in that direction by pointing out the similar yet distinctly different clothing choices and their age difference as well. I don't know if I can quite commit to one theory or the other. I know that there are things within the dream that Yusuf says about the sedative, for example, that lead me to believe that could that really happen? Could it allow them to get back? Would there be so much time that has passed that it would be inescapable at that point? Something that Yusuf says is that there's no way that you can get out of limbo until the sedation has eased. He doesn't really say how long the sedation can last. He does say how long the dream will last if you stay asleep. So what he does say about the sedative is that it will extend the dream period so that it's 20 times normal. So 10 hours on the flight equals a week in the first dream, which equals 6 months in the second dream, which equals 10 years in the third dream. That's if they're going to ride it out the entire time. But they have a plan to kick themselves out of each dream level up to the dream level above that. But the problem is when they get down into limbo, since nobody really knows how long that can last, and the only person that really knows is Cobb. He was able to get out of the dream after 50 years there, right? When he went in with Mal. So we see that Saito has aged at least that much, if not more. And luckily his mind still appears to be intact. But if the fourth layer down is 20 times longer than 10 years, that's, 200 years. So is that possible? They are having, I'm guessing, a stronger sedative than what Cobb was experimenting with when he and Mal fell into limbo. So, despite the amount of years that have passed that have allowed Saito to age so quickly, is that long enough for the sedation to have eased so that they can kill themselves and get back to reality? It's kind of an unknowable question, I guess. But really, something that we don't ever find, the movie never tells us this, but after repeat watchings and close inspection of the film, we realize that Cobb can't really use Mal's totem. He says himself to Ariadne that nobody else can use your totem, or else, it could be tampered with. So, him using Mal's totem can't really be the true indicator of whether or not he's in somebody else's dream. The real totem that we find out later, or that you'll realize if you pay really close attention and watch it multiple times, because he doesn't tell you this, it's one of the mysteries of this film that you can unlock, is that he wears his wedding ring only in the dream world. If he's ever in a dream, he's got his wedding ring on, but in reality he doesn't. So when we get to the end, after the inception has taken place and Cobb goes to limbo and there's that moment of uncertainty about whether or not Saito's even able to bring them back from that fourth layer or from limbo to get them back to reality, whether or not that's really what's happening or if he's just lost in his own dream, we have to check his ring finger. And Nolan is always 2 steps ahead of us because he knows eventually somebody's going to figure that trick out. And so he goes out of his way to hide that finger at the end in the airport and when they get back home. It's just not fair. Laying all these breadcrumbs and then like intentionally leading us one way so that we won't find out the real answer. And I think Nolan knows that what's truly satisfying about a movie isn't getting a resolution. It's not having everything tied up in a neat little bow. It's giving you something to think about, something that'll leave an impression that is sticking in your mind. Nolan performs his own Inception on us with this film. By leaving that top spinning and wobbling just a little bit, he makes us all think that Cobb's either in a dream or not in a dream. It's the same thing that Cobb did to his wife as what Nolan did to us. He planted that idea in our brains, and for months, everybody could not let that idea go. I mean, there was a huge debate online, and anybody who watches the movie now still probably comes to different conclusions. And I could honestly see it going either way. But really, Nolan knows exactly what he's doing, and the reason why he set up an ambiguous ending that is impossible to tell one way or the other in a definitive way is because he wants us to know that he has truly reached that level of catharsis, that regardless of whether or not he's in a dream or reality, he has accepted his reality. And when he spins that top on the table, he lets it go, and he goes to his children and he accepts them as reality, whether or not they really are. And I think that's a really powerful statement. Not everything has to be confirmed to us. We have to take a leap of faith. Yeah, it's a really poignant ending that a lot of people I think are gonna miss. I mean, I know other people have made these observations before, but I just am endlessly fascinated with all of the multitude of insightful concepts and ideas that are planted throughout this script. Again, these are little Easter eggs that Nolan leaves into the screenplays so that you question it regardless. He wants you to question the reality of the ending. But I think the real key is, like I said, Cobb has achieved catharsis. He has accepted his reality. He's comfortable where he is. He's not going to keep trying to get to his children. He's not going to fall into the trap that Maul fell into. He's going to allow himself to be happy. Whereas throughout the rest of the movie, he refused to look at his kids because he didn't want that to be his reality. I think that's what really shows Nolan's genius in this movie, is his ability to interlay these complex ideas with complex emotions so that they represent each other and yet they intertwine and react with each other as well. He doesn't want you to know the true ending of the film, and that's why he leaves that wedding ring out of sight. There's no definitive shot that I can tell that shows whether or not he's wearing that ring. This movie isn't really about the ending, but that's what sticks with you. And throughout the entire film, there are just wonderful, wonderful scenes that I will treasure every time I watch this movie. It's really fascinating and it's endlessly watchable. It's super entertaining. So I hope that you guys enjoy it. Watch it again. Look for things that you may not have noticed before. I promise you, you'll find new stuff each time you see it. Question the reality. Try to figure out the secret. I don't know if it's possible, but really I think this movie's lending itself to that sort of scrutiny and wanting you to come to your own conclusion. I think that's really the most important thing. This is a true work of art. It is what you take out of it. Everybody can have their own interpretation and everybody can enjoy it equally, I think. Anyway, that's my lengthy rave session about Inception. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any other suggestions of films that you want me to rave about. Films that are universally loved. A few that I've been batting around in my mind are Star Wars. Obviously, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I love Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jaws. There are a ton of movies that I could cover. The Lord of the Rings trilogy. Let me know what one you want me to cover next if you like this format. If not, that's totally fine. I just wanted to try out a new type of video that I think would sort of allow me to go a little bit more in depth on a movie that I wouldn't otherwise cover because it's not underrated necessarily. Let me know what you guys think. Subscribe to my channel so that you can catch my next rave session video or a 5 good things about video or a defense video. Thank you guys so much for supporting me in my public service. I feel like it's not only my duty to defend movies that get wrongfully criticized, but also to glory in the movies that completely hit a home run that everybody can acknowledge. So I appreciate you guys coming along with me through this cerebral journey of Inception, and I hope you guys come back again soon. So until next time, the defense rests.